Well, I think we're live. So thank you so much, audience. Thank you so much, panel members, for joining me. My name is Deepinder Uppal. I'm the Chief Architect for TIBCO Federal. I'm also the Director for Vertical Innovation, under which public sector sits. Prior to my role here at TIBCO, I was the Assistant Division Director for the Criminal Justice Information Center. So under the responsibility for those data feeds, NCIC, III, a lot of lean feeds. And then prior to that, I was an academic, taught systems logic, advanced logic, probability theory. And then prior to that, I was in the United States military, served in the capacity of signals. So, done a lot with data science and a lot with data, but it pales in comparison to the people that we have here on this panel. So I'm super excited to be here. I'm super excited to get started. So thought we might start this off with a round of introductions. I'm just going to walk across the screen. So Rodrigo, why don't you take it away?
Oh man, Deepinder, I was hoping I didn't have to follow that.
Okay,
what an awesome CV. What an awesome CV. So my background's in data, probably doing data science before it was called data science. So analytics at FinTech, Bloomberg, and some of the other tech firms here in the Valley. Always been focused on kind of like the industry application of data science. So on the so what for the business. In my most current role, I lead what is called an insights and analytics team. So insights kind of an ambiguous term, but it's really that cross center of where data science meets the sales motion, the marketing motion, and starts to build those systems that power more of what we like to call predictive selling as opposed to reactive selling. So I'm very excited to be on this panel, and thank you for the invite.
Yeah. Vienna, outside of that amazing backdrop that you have there.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Vienna Thompkins. I'm currently a data analyst at the Center for Policing Equity. I've only been there about 2 months, so I'm still learning all the amazing things that they're doing. They mainly research racial bias in policing, so very timely work. Prior to the Center for Policing Equity, I was a senior data and policy specialist at the Crime and Justice Institute, where I did a lot of work directly with state and county level criminal justice systems to help implement reforms and develop policies, and focusing on the data side of that. So very practical data analyst, data science type work. And then prior to that, I worked at the Brennan Center for Justice, doing research sort of on a more national federal level. So most of my work has been in the criminal justice space, various levels, various types of data that we're working with. And now I'm focused in a little more on a very specific piece of the system and a very important problem solving issue, which is super exciting. So really excited to be on this panel with everyone and to talk more about the applications.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good. Thank you so much. Yeah, I worked in CJIC, so there's a lot of data associated with UCR, hate crime, all that. Interesting work. Francis, what about yourself?
So I am at AT&T. I've been at AT&T for 17 years. Most of my adult work has been in telecom. Currently, I'm Director of Advanced Analytics in the Customer Advocacy and Customer Experience organization at AT&T. And prior to coming into this role, and I've only been in this role, 1 month and 20 days. But prior to that, I did advanced analytics within customer experience, global supply chain, and marketing. So a lot of background in doing advanced analytics, building out models, developing them for different roles and business questions across AT&T. So, and I love what I'm doing. Today I have a full team. First of all, I get really excited. So you may have to tell me to take it down a notch. As soon as I start talking data, you're going to see a big smile because I love data. But my current team is so awesome because I have data analysts and I have data engineers. So I get to build that cross function between going out and getting the data and then using the data, which is like all love.
No, that's essential. I'm super happy you're on the call because I definitely do want to get around to talking about that. Often when we talk about data science, when we talk about data processing, ELT, ETL, virtualization flow, I mean, it's such a technical concept, right? But the end user is often ignored, right? Like the business unit, how do you get that team together? What is that? So that's a really interesting perspective. Kratik,
what's up, guys?
For being here. Hi. So what's going on?
So, well, first of all, thank you for having me. Am I audible? Am I good?
Yeah. You're good to go.
Awesome. So I'm the director of sports science and analytics for the Texas A&M football team. As you can see, the wall behind me. I'm originally from India. I graduated with an undergrad in engineering, like most Indians. But
you mean you're not a doctor?
For my master's, I studied sports, specialized in sports analytics, and for engineering, I specialized in AI. And now what I'm doing is I'm working in sports, but then I'm using data to do the same. I deal with all the data that the team collects and works on. So a lot of people in the industry actually get data from outside. We kind of we create our own data, if you want to call it, because let me show you something.
Show and tell.
I wasn't supposed to, but so this right here is a GPS monitor. So all of our athletes wear GPS monitors. It has an accelerometer, a gyroscope, and a magnetometer in it. They wear it in a sports bra. Because this guy is wearing it, we call it sports bros. So we had so all of our athletes, they wear sports bros, and that's how we collect, I think, a part of the data. They all wear heart rate monitors, so we get GPS data, heart rate data from the accelerometry data. Then we get data from Pro Football Focus, and a lot of stuff that we code into the system, which helps us break down opponents, and there's a lot of computer vision and machine learning stuff that we do as well that helps us scout the right players. We track speeds from film using optical flow in Python, which really helps. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
No, this is awesome. That's awesome. I've been luckily involved with a couple of biometric projects with DoD and stuff. So that's interesting. Just out of curiosity, so that load jack that you were talking about, is that only during their play time, or is that something that they wear?
So every time that they train, and obviously they play in the games. So they wear this every time they go out to train. So not in the weight room, so not when they're lifting weights, but when they're on the field. So in the summer we do summer conditioning. Right now we are in fall camp, which is the craziest part of the year for us. And then in 2 weeks the football season starts. So they wear it during every single time that they train.
All right, cool. Is that because they're not allowed to wear watches? Is that what it is? So they can't wear a Garmin or an Apple Watch or.
So a difference, all right. Like one of these units right here costs like $5,000.
Yeah, this watch is probably 200 tops.
Yeah.
Right.
So the thing is, so this unit inside of it, this is one of our freshmen, Amari Daniels. So like these units, they have an accelerometer inside of it. So you basically can track how heavy is a guy getting on his feet as he's training, which helps us predict soft tissue injuries. It tells us again with the GPS metrics, it tells us how fast is he going, how far he has gone, all of that. But then then we have guys wearing heart rate straps, which gives us an idea about their recovery, also the anxiety levels. And the cool thing about the units, everything just flows into the unit.
Wow, that's yeah. I do want to pull that apart later on in our discussion, just simply for the fact that, we are doing a lot of work with just different federal agencies alongside some federal components. And we're making use of like two different watches, Garmin alongside the more updated Apple Watch, which does have an accelerometer, also has, O2, also saturation in this, but we'll get into that one second. I do want to give everybody an opportunity just to talk about the project that they're currently involved in. Just like Kratik did. I mean, that was such a great intro. It was so interesting. I'm just assuming that everybody else in the panel has probably done some amazing work as well. So I'd love to give you guys the opportunity to kind of give a shout out to it, and maybe we can kind of energize some discussion around it as well. What about you, Rodrigo?
Yeah. Well, as you guys know, we are entering the great reshuffle, I believe it's been coined, where we expect nearly half of all people employed to change jobs in the next 6 months.
Wow.
So being at LinkedIn, and I don't know if I actually said the company I work for currently, which is LinkedIn, being at LinkedIn, there is just a wealth of current data that we have to help our members kind of predict and find their next best role. And on the other side of the house, if you are a company hiring or afraid that you're going to have your talent pulled away from you by competitors, nodding at Google, nodding at Facebook to throw money at people, especially for like engineering and for data scientists, so it's like top of mind. We're working right now on like how to empower them with the right information to understand not just what you can do in terms of, you know, predicting who was likely to leave based on like changes to their LinkedIn profile, but also empowering them with like, well, what should you do about it? So LinkedIn Learning is like a big component of ours in our suite. So if you up level and upskill, say your data analyst team to become more like data scientists, well, now you've invested in them and they're much less likely to leave and much less likely to be susceptible to a company throwing a bunch of equity, a bunch of money at them. So that's our current project, is how do we use kind of the wealth of LinkedIn data with privacy top of mind? Again, this is all very anonymized and aggregated. How do we use that to both facilitate, we talk about it as two sides of the world. We have a marketplace, and then we also have a B2B business. So the marketplace is where jobs and job seekers meet. And then the B2B side of the house is where our products help corporations and businesses, nonprofits, and higher education look for the best talent and manage their talent accordingly. So a wealth of data. I think typical challenges I'm sure everybody's running into. It's unstructured. We're in the middle of a shift from like our on-prem systems when we were LinkedIn. We're now part of Microsoft, so like we need to get on Azure. You know, all the stuff, all the sausage making around data science. That keeps me up at night probably the most. But the exciting part is that we're part of like a really big moment in time right now where we see a lot of people changing jobs, and we want them to do it using LinkedIn.
Wow, yeah, that is a really impactful story. It really is. Just a follow-up question on that. Just in terms of, you know, I have seen in the past, like there have been different projects associated with LinkedIn in the sense of providing a lot of that anonymous data out to third parties. So, you know, people can get a sense of a lot of those key metrics that you said, you know, kind of crowdsource a lot of solutions, a lot of trend analysis associated with where would be the next job, you know, where would the openings be and which ones are phasing away and so on and so forth. Is LinkedIn still committed to that line of thought? Or are they still going forward? And
yeah, I would say two fronts really. So we do a lot of work with policy. So we have a team called the Economic Graph Team, so it's a sister team to mine, that works more on the academic side of the house. So we show up at the World Economic Forum, try to provide data and like what we see kind of on the ground from, again, all the wealth of information people put on LinkedIn of, you know, where they're considering moving, what skills are top of mind, what areas are actually really hot industries, because we see people getting hired into those. So a lot of macroeconomic trends, and that's my background. I have a master's in econometrics that we can glean from that data. The other side of the house is, again, for people and for businesses thinking about where should I, you know, in the pre-COVID world, where should I put an office? Now, like, where are actually the gems of high talent that maybe were not well serviced because everybody was just thinking San Francisco, New York. Yeah. We're definitely mining a lot of information there to try to put in the hands of job seekers and people who are looking to hire. So we are definitely committed to that. If you are a business, we also sell a product called LinkedIn Talent Insights, which does that from a UI.
Like through an API. Okay, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Vienna, I'm kind of interested, really interested actually in some of the work that you're doing around law enforcement, you know, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, I'm only like 2 months into my job at CPE, so still very much getting my feet wet and learning about the projects that I'm going to be taking on. Like I said, their focus is around equity and policing. It's in the name. And so, we are really have sort of a few different arms of work within that. So there is a portfolio of work that CPE does that does work directly with law enforcement agencies and does kind of similar work to what I did previously at the Justice Institute, where they kind of go in and help analyze the data, help make suggestions around things that maybe could be done differently or done better, of course, with a specific lens around race and ethnicity. And then there's the science program, which I'm a part of, which does a little bit more of that sort of research. So not necessarily working with stakeholders, but saying, where is the field? How can we contribute to the field? And how can we make this information accessible and available and useful to folks, whether they're academics or policymakers or in communities and want to make change. So that's the work that I'm getting ramped up on. And I can tell you, I'm hoping to do a presentation at the October conference. So if you want to learn more about my project, you should sign up for that conference. But I think there are definitely some themes across all of the work that I've done that are super relevant to this space and also very much top of mind in the field, on the policy side and the community and advocacy side as well. A lot of work that I have done over the past few years has been around the use of algorithmic risk assessments, particularly in the pretrial context, which is really tough. I think one of the big challenges that we have in working with data and doing sort of statistical analysis in this space is that, it involves people's lives and liberty, and you have to make sure that you're explaining the things that you're doing in a way that makes sense to someone who is not a statistician or is not a data scientist, who maybe took one stats class, or they're an attorney who really wants nothing to do with math at all. And so there's a very big challenge in saying, okay, we have there's all this potential, there's all these things we can use, but we also want to make sure that what we're doing is explainable and understandable to the people that are implementing it and to the people that are going to be impacted by it. So, if I'm going to trial and I find out that this algorithm was used to make a suggestion, I want to understand how that works. And I want to make sure that it's not going to be biased against me in some way. So there's kind of this fine line when you're talking about applying data science and applying things like, AI and ML. I think in particular, there tends to be sort of an overblown or overstatement about the advancedness of AI or ML, particularly in criminal justice. I think most of the time we're talking about linear regressions or logistic regressions. We're not talking about, an AI network that's making all these decisions. It's also never taking decisions away from judges or from folks in the system. It's providing more information. So that's always a challenge. And then, of course, on the other side, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this, Deepinder, the data itself is also no data is ever perfect, but criminal justice data in particular can be very, very tricky. And I'm finding as well, now that I'm starting to work more with specifically policing data, how the data is recorded, who's recording it, who's the person who puts down what someone's race is, is it the police officer, is it self-reported, how do those things work? Because it makes a really big difference when you're analyzing the data and understanding the accuracy of the data. And so I think one of the big challenges in both policing and in criminal justice data science more generally is how do we conscientiously, thoughtfully, ethically make decisions using data that we know is imperfect in ways that could really impact people's lives. And so that's sort of the major challenge that we're kind of dealing with, and also saying, but we want to work with what we have and we still want to make forward progress. So how do we do that in a way that is ethical and that makes sense and is also grounded in, social science theory and in things that make logical sense, in a way that, maybe people who are working in finance don't really have to consider so much when they're, trying to predict, market factors or things like that. So yeah, it's a very challenging area, but it's definitely.
And she just.
I think we lost her.
She just froze.
Oh no!
Oh no!
That's unfortunate. I was really getting into that. But all right, it's okay. I think that Vienna will just get back on. But until she does that, let's just go ahead and transition, Francis. Interested to learn some of the work you're doing at AT&T.
Yes, it's awesome. And I'll say about Vienna, I mean, one of the things that I have to say up front is just cell phones. So we're not saving too many lives. But we put things in your hand that you can use to help you save a life. Okay, but definitely our goal. Honestly, the org that I'm in right now, our big goal is to ensure that customers get the value out of their products and services that we provide them from AT&T. We want that experience to be frictionless. We want it to be seamless. We want it to be a comfortable experience. And of course, as in every other organization, we want to sell you more things. So we want you to be happy about what you have, what you get from us at this point. So a lot of the work that I do is around building out models and data and connecting that data so that we get a picture of what the customer has, what products and services they have, and how they're using those products and services. And to be perfectly honest, how they feel about the products and services that they have from AT&T. And that's the big piece of what we do that is so exciting. And I get excited about it because of the piece that we have been missing for a long time, which is emotion and sentiment, and what the customer really thinks. A lot of the, I will tell you, when I completed my dissertation, my initial dissertation topic was going to be about advertising, because I was really interested in how you reach out to customers. And I went to our leadership at AT&T, and I had a great leader. His name is Joey Schultz. I love him to death. He actually read the first 3 chapters of my dissertation, which, as we all know, can not be that exciting. He read it. And when I went to his office, he said, "Frances, this is great. I think you're onto something. This looks good." He says, "But you know what? Let me show you what we really care about." And he goes over to his bookcase and he pulls out a Harvard Business Review article. And we all know that article. The only question you need, Net Promoter Score. Are you willing to recommend our products and services to your friends, colleagues, and family? That's the question. So I actually switched up my dissertation to compare Net Promoter Score, customer satisfaction, and take those metrics and see if they were great predictors of customer loyalty, customer behavior, and revenue generating for the organization. And I say all of that to say that brings me kind of full circle back to what I do today, which is take a look at how customers feel about the products and services and the interaction they have with AT&T, and connect that back to operational metrics. So the thing that we have been missing all along is we think we know how the customer feels. We think we know what the customer wants, but there's nothing like having the customer tell you what they want and how they feel, and then being able to actually connect that to what they're actually doing. So,
I got a question for you, Frances. So, somebody in the comments, also mentioned something similar to what I was going to ask you. So you're doing such important work at, taking a look at your customer base, aggregating that data, and being able to deconflict it against like the strategic direction of AT&T.
mm-hmm.
What services can they provide? How can they help more within that area? Not only to encourage adoption, but also to encourage better quality service as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
In that way, I was following, obviously when I was in law enforcement, I was following, Firstnet for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and, band 14, other preemptive bands and so on. And, I was really following the Verizon AT&T competition, so to speak, for Firstnet.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was encouraged when AT&T kind of took the step forward, won that contract to provide that interoperable band to not only law enforcement, but all first responders.
Right.
But what I do understand also, just because of the close relationships that we've maintained with law enforcement and intelligence communities, is that the adoption of Firstnet as a band, it's not been as quick as thought of. I mean, a lot of people are getting on it. Even now, a lot of people are moving towards it. Have you ever thought, Frances, of taking a lot of the work that you're doing in the commercial sector and applying that to Firstnet in the sense of understanding that customer base, understanding what their needs are, and how to encourage adoption, how to encourage expansion of Firstnet priority to first responder agencies?
Actually, we've actually been doing some of that work. Now, it's not being done specifically in the organization that I was a part of, but but the reason is because I was part of customer experience and customer advocacy for about 5 years. The Firstnet, they have their own entire org that focuses on everything Firstnet. Because there's such a special organization. And Victor Fong is actually a colleague of mine, and he put a comment about Firstnet in the comments.
He's calling you out.
But one of the reasons that I didn't focus on that when I discussed what I focus on day to day is because they really have, because that is such an important sector, they actually have a whole organization and they just focus on Firstnet. So they are doing some of that that analysis and they are doing some of the specific push out to our first responders. Now, I have my own personal theory. This is not an AT&T theory. It's not based on data that I've looked at, but my own personal theory around the adoption of Firstnet is twofold. Number one, I have some close friends who are either policemen, firemen, or nurses and doctors. So I have a close-knit group of friends who actually, because if you know, whatever organization you work for, if you have friends, they're always going to come to you. So my friends are like pounding on me, and they were actually pounding on me at a get-together about Firstnet.
Yeah.
And they were telling me the things that they didn't like about it and did like about it. And the big conversation that they were having with me was around the fact that, number one, the devices were huge. They were built, and they were that way on purpose because they needed to be rugged. But for my friends, they were like, but I have to carry this thing around. And I'm like, okay, gotcha. The second issue that they told me is that because of their family network, they may not all be on the same network or have the same cell phone service. And they were finding like one of my friends, his wife was like, he came to me, he's like, go talk to, I'll just say her name, we call her TP. He's like, go talk to TP because she won't let me get a Firstnet device. And so I go over and I'm like, why won't you let him get a Firstnet device? And she was like, because that's a third phone.
Yeah.
He's going to keep the other two phones. He's going to get a third phone, and we don't need a third phone. In the end, I talked her into letting him get it, but it wasn't because the reason that she said, okay, he can go ahead and have one was because I explained the reason for Firstnet. The whole premise of him being in contact, regardless of what else is going on, because it has this special band. Yeah. So the special band part of it is the selling point, but there's all these other things, just like everything else that we do in customer experience, that we need to overcome. And we call it friction.
Yeah,
it's
no,
friction.
Definitely.
And it's making it, and we also talk about this, what we call a happy path. And that's not a happy path. If I have to go get my good friend to go talk to my wife so that I can get my first phone, that's not a happy path.
Are you listening, Victor? Are you listening? Are you taking notes? That's good stuff.
So that's one of the big, so definitely, and we recognize that. So when I was in 2 orgs ago, I was in an organization called Distribution Insights and Customer Experience, or DICE. And in that particular org, we did do some analysis that we provided back on Firstnet. And we did some surveys as well on Firstnet, our first responders, and we provided that feedback up the chain. But yes, there are some things that we have to overcome. But I think one of the biggest issues is just life today. I have 2 cell phones. Everybody has a couple of devices that they already have. And now you're bringing this other device in and saying, hey, get this third one, or, whatever that case might be. So I think that's how some of the issues that we're facing with Firstnet.
No, that's a very valid response. Kratik, thank you so much. Like earlier on, really energizing the conversation with your use case. Oh man, did we lose him?
We lost. But the answer.
The timing.
I was going to say, Francis, who at AT&T do I need to call about my fiber going out?
Well, I will tell you, in all honesty, cue me later. Send me a message. At AT&T, we call it queuing, but send me a message later.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, while we're waiting for Kratik to get back on. I think he has to just log in again. Because I do have some really, I really do want to know more about the biometric project that he has. I think it's very interesting. I'm all about adoption of new technologies. I want to kind of get to kind of something Vienna just kind of touched on before we lost some connection, and then kind of bring it on to the rest of the group. And that's just upon data quality, right? I mean, we have so much when it comes to the idea of advanced analytics, the ability to use ML AI pipelines, even the way we visualize and what we're using to visualize. Like, Francis, you were going off on cell phones and tablets, MDTs. I mean, we have so much that we can do. But often you put something bad in, your result is going to be bad, So what are we doing? What are you all doing when it comes to data quality, when it comes to understanding what is the data quality and understanding exactly what's going on? And Vienna, I definitely want to throw this at you first, simply for the fact that, as you mentioned, the data that you're utilizing is honestly coming from an unfunded mandate, right? So by being an unfunded mandate, people don't have to provide that information specifically around hate crimes. Above and beyond that, when it comes to that data, the data format is all different. The data quality, depending on participating agencies, are all different. So what are you doing to address some of that data? Are you deconflicting with other UCR codes? Are you, having some sort of data quality routines? Like, how are you ensuring that your end product is something that you can stand behind?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think, in my previous role, working more directly with agencies, we almost always had a good chunk of our recommendation sections in our report dedicated to how to improve data quality or how to improve data management. One of the big things that we would come across, especially doing pretrial work where we want to connect law enforcement data with court data, is that there's not a unique identifier that will track across those two systems. And so what do you do in that case? Sometimes you actually can't really do anything and you have to kind of isolate your analysis and do two separate analyses. Or there's some way that you can back out some type of identifier or merge through data sets or something like that. But then, of course, you have a lot of caveats about what potential errors could be happening from that. I think one of the big things is just like eliminate free text fields as much as possible.
So guide them down the tree, right?
Yeah, the things that we've seen in free text fields, I mean, especially for things, like race and ethnicity, why is that a free text field? It shouldn't be. You're just asking for someone to enter something offensive. Yeah. It's really bad. So, that's always sort of saying, and also helping folks understand, because they might not really understand what the impact of their data systems and their data collection processes not being very good. They don't really know what that kind of trickles down into until we show up and we say, well, we couldn't do this analysis you asked for, XYZ. And so, yeah, that was almost always one of the things. And I think in terms of an unfunded mandate too, we would often come in to help implement legislation that had been passed, but there was no money associated with, hey, you have to document XYZ, you have to do these types of reports and whatever, but there was no money to go along with it. And so we would sometimes come into states and be sitting on, working groups or committees trying to help give them suggestions.
Yeah.
There's no incentive for them, aside from the governor says I should, to actually do these things in a meaningful way. And they just say, well, we just want more money. We unless we have money. So trying to find creative ways to motivate people to implement these upgrades, or and sometimes it's really not even a massive lift. But sometimes, and this happens a lot, agencies will be using sort of proprietary software, or they're using systems that they don't have control over, or that they have to pay, however much for every new custom report they want to run. And so that's another big barrier of saying, well, can't you just add this one field? A lot of times it's like, well, it's going to cost us an arm and a leg to go back to, Tyler Technologies or whoever, and ask to change the way we do this one thing. So I think there's a lot of catching up that needs to happen in terms of the data systems that folks are using, building internal capacity to develop their own systems, and then also sort of on the software side, thinking about their definitions, even having a data dictionary sometimes would make things much easier. Thinking through those definitions will sometimes help folks realize, oh, we define it one way in this county and totally differently in this county. So when we try,
I get a good story.
Level, none of it makes any sense.
Oh,
so,
no, I got a really, really good story about it. So like in the comments, Michael Darden said something really impactful. He's like, standards, and from what I get from that is like, a standardized approach for input, right? Like, okay, people should be able to list out things in a very standardized fashion. But, honestly, I'm a big believer in not adding to an ecosystem, right? Here I work for TIBCO, I do a lot of work across the federal, across public sector. And the number one comment I get from the government groups are like, oh, you're not going to just add something else on that we don't need. So often, the challenge is to take a look at their ecosystem and say, okay, what do you have that is working that we can modify to encompass the larger use case? So for you, Vienna, one thing that I always thought of is, obviously UCR was put together to provide a standardized method for intake, right? And that would mean that, okay, if somebody's following a definitional input into UCR schema, they're getting what they need to get in order to get that output, which would be relevant for groups such as yours. But I think the problem is adoption. Once again, it goes back to, hey, a smaller agency doesn't have the resources, they just don't, to go through their own processes to modify or purchase a CAD system or a records management system that encompasses like a tree instead of just a flat text field. In fact, there's so many smaller agencies that are actually just still handwriting reports when it comes to that. And that's just for that. When you start talking about citations and you start talking about crash instances and the citations issued, I know e-citation programs has been a huge movement forward by NISTA and a lot of groups with, Office of Highway Safety Planning. But even then, that's only gotten up to 85% usage. And there's still a lot of groups out there, unfortunately, in a lot of areas that are often the worst affected, to incorporate technology that can unify a standardized approach to input. So I definitely.
Yeah, and I think UCR can definitely be helpful, but. Uh-oh.
It's okay.
No, pros. I mean, maybe just to riff off that a little bit, right? So the other side of this is, right, the more standardized, like UCR schema or a canonical approach to collecting data, it has to kind of combat with or compete with on a website with engagement, right? We know the more fields you put in there for someone to fill out, the more likely they're to drop off, the less likely they're to complete and do the thing that you want them to do. So at LinkedIn, our approach is one of the biggest challenges we've been facing is how to infer skills, right? So you tell me that you are good at SQL, great, but not everybody fills that out. How can I infer that you are actually good at SQL? Do I look at your, the roles that you've had? Do I look at endorsements you've had around the SQL skill, for example?
Is that why you have the certifications now for SQL, the certifications for
Exactly. And I would say our approach in general, and I think this kind of ties back to what you guys are talking about a little bit, there's a bit of incentives. What does the user get from input? Right. So yes, there's cost associated with making changes on something like collecting data from criminal reports or from tickets. But what's the value back to the agency? And for us, we've been anchored if you're going to give us your data, we want to make sure you have value back. So the certification gives you an ability to take that skill and market yourself as hey, you're good at this, this, and you have the backing of LinkedIn's credibility to say that we believe this person is genuinely good at this. And so it's been a little bit of that, creating incentive to go through the process of more standardized, less inferred information and more of just directly given information is kind of our approach to getting to better, cleaner data. So we don't have to infer. The only other example I would point out is we spent a lot of time and a lot of data science hours around trying to infer gender. Which is really important from a demographic perspective to understand, if there is bias in hiring trends. So if we know companies are trying to hire a more diverse workforce, can we tell them, hey, your recruiters are only indexing to this one racial group or this one gender, and therefore you're never going to end up with a real diverse workforce. And we've kind of moved away from trying to infer it and more to if we allow you to choose your pronouns, that's probably more important actually than what our algorithm thinks about what your gender is. And in that way, we can use that data to better inform our non-biased algorithms.
So, Kratik, thank you so much for rejoining us. I apologize. I guess the connection string might have been really, really weak there, but I know that we're running really, really short on time. But I really definitely want to know, what was the impetus? Frances gave such a great explanation of what she's doing and her driving force to incorporate all the data to promote customer decisions, how to incorporate a better workforce. What about you? Like, how did you guys get to the idea of using a GPS device or a device that would grab the biometrics and be able to present that data? Is it just to get a competitive edge? Is it a more...
Well, so I mean, a couple of things, right? So we were the first. So I was with Coach Jimbo Fisher. I was with him at Florida State, and then when he moved to A&M, I moved with him to Texas A&M. We're the first team in the country to actually use GPS tracking in American football. So you didn't have a college team, you didn't have an NFL team, definitely no high school team using GPS monitors. But we were the first ones. Coach Fisher is one of the most innovative and smartest men I've ever been around. He sent 2 of his assistants to Australia to find an edge, and they came back with the GPS tracking system.
Nice.
And now you have so many, hundreds of teams using it around the country, football teams. NFL's, had Zebra develop a system for them. That's RFID. And a lot of stuff that you see on ESPN and on TV, NFL Network with Amazon Web Service, NFL had Zebra develop it for them. And now AWS got in and all of that. But Jimbo
Nice.
Fisher was the man who actually started it all.
Well, that's amazing. We should definitely continue this conversation off this. Number one, I definitely want to give Frances an opportunity, but we've done a lot when it comes to biometrics. It would be good to go. Yeah, what were you going to say, Kratik?
I was going to say that I actually worked with your system, TIBCO Spotfire.
Okay. I was thinking more along the web focus components, but yeah, sure.
I actually worked with your system a few years ago. We did a lot of stuff with predictions and regressions and neural network modeling, and it's a great system to just visualize the data as well. So.
Wow, what a plug. I should have let you talk more. What about you, Frances? Did you use our system too?
No.
Yes, just say yes.
We built our own.
Yeah. Well, I think we are actually 1 minute over, but, I think that, I really appreciate the conversation today. I really do. All of you have contributed so much within your fields, as well as within this conversation that we're having today. Just internally amongst us 5, let's definitely exchange emails and continue the conversation. I think there's areas where we all can help each other just through work we've done in the past or things that, might come up. For instance, Kratik, I definitely want to talk to you about your biometrics program. we're doing something that you might find interesting with US SOCOM, grabbing almost the identical biometric data in a very interesting fashion to get it even in a disconnected state, intermittent connected state, being able to pick it up in real time. Vienna, I'd love to talk to you about data quality issues, simply for the fact that, we've done so much within that. And that's a passion of mine, being part of CJIC. And then when it comes to LinkedIn, I just really want to talk about those. Someone said something really interesting in the commentary. They're like, bias can come up in tech skills and you need a gender to validate. I think that there's an interesting conversation to be had there. And of course, Frances, I definitely want to talk more about the data that you are capturing. How can that be augmented? How can that be emulated by other companies that want that secret when it comes to data prep and the visualizations in order to move things forward? Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Appreciate all your time.
Thank you.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
And let's stay in touch for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
See you guys.
So.